Hi again. Welcome to the Chrysalis Room where we heal, become, and thrive. This is episode number 2 where we're going to talk about renewing the mind, how our thoughts can keep us in the cocoon. Okay? And I'm your host, Coach Tay. I'm new to this. Give me some grace. I give y'all some grace. Y'all give me some grace. Okay. So, the premise of this episode is you cannot heal with the same thoughts that hurt you. I might have to say this 3 times. You cannot heal with the same thoughts that hurt you. You cannot heal with the same thoughts that are hurting you. I had to say it for the people in the back, So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how our thoughts shape our emotions, our decisions, and ultimately our sense of self, okay, our identities. So I'm also going to be telling you about how renewing your mind so you can live and not just exist, okay? If you've seen episode 1, I talked about how, there is hope. And we have this superpower of neuroplasticity in our brain, which I'll talk a lot more about this episode. But again, like, I just feel like I need to say this one more time. You cannot heal with the same thoughts that hurt you. And I think I'm going to say that throughout this episode because we need to get that. And we need to understand that in 2026. Okay? We need to understand that in 2026. If we don't do anything else, we are going to understand that we cannot heal with the same thoughts that hurt us. Okay? So, the overall breakdown of today is going to be how, first I'm going to talk about how our minds create our reality. Then I'm going to talk about this thing our brain has, this chip our brain has, which is called a negativity bias. I'm going to go into what that means and what it means for us. Then I'm going to talk about the brain's neuroplasticity, our superpower. And then we're going to discuss, or I'm going to discuss how we can begin breaking the cycle of negative thinking. Yes, because we have the power to do it, guys. That is the beauty of it. When we're in survival mode and been there so long, some things just feel like it's never going to happen. But it will, because it can. And that's the beauty of it all. So if you are with me and you are ready to address this, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to address it, and we're going to address it really good, okay? Let's get into it. Okay. So, first of all, how does our mind create our reality? And I believe this is something many of us, we don't know that we know this. But when you hear it, it's one of those things that you knew, but you didn't know you knew. Or but now you will. Okay. All right, enough of the tongue twisters. Okay. So, we experience all of our experiences through 3 filters, okay? So everything that we experience is through our sensory input and events, whatever, we categorize them in different things of that nature and compartmentalize them and all those different things through filters, okay? And the 3 main filters I'm going to talk about right now, which is typically, right, we have our thoughts, and our thought the meaning that we will assign to an experience, okay? So we have our thoughts. Our thoughts give us the meaning between about the event. Event or experience, okay? That's what our thoughts are, or not necessarily what they are, but when it comes to experiences, it will give it the meaning. Okay, then there's the emotion, and what the meaning makes you feel. So it's not, okay, it's not, your emotion is not the emotion of the experience itself. The emotion is the response to the meaning you have ascribed to the experience. Okay, it's the way you interpreted that experience. That's where that emotion comes from. Okay, and why is that part very valid for you to understand? If you have been in survival mode, and you, especially if you have trauma, the meanings you assign to certain events, they may not be that accurate, because your brain perceives everything as a threat, whether it's real or not. And even if it's not even a threat and you're very safe, if your brain is telling you you're a danger, your thought is going to ascribe a meaning to this experience in a way that is going to be categorized as a threat or something dangerous for you. And the emotion is going to come behind that as this is dangerous, right? Is going to be fear. Okay. Which our third filter is behavior. So it's the action that follows. Okay. If you can remember our our survival mechanisms, right? Fight or flight. This typically is what's going on, right? If I'm on a hike and I see a bear, right? I see a bear along the path or off the path. I sense it, my body is signaling danger. Okay? So the meaning that it has been assigned already is danger. The emotion is more likely going to be fear, or it's going to be, I'm going to get out of this. You know, it's going to be a strong emotion, like a combative one, a defense one. Okay? And the behavior is either going to be, I'm going to, like some people charge, or some people will yell, or I'm going to run. I'm going to find a way up out of here. Okay? It shapes your reality. So just to repeat this again, so we're all on the same page. We have 3 filters that we filter our experiences through. Our thoughts, okay? So when we experience something, we're going to have a thought about it. And through that thinking process, we are going to associate a meaning with this experience, okay? And then there's going to be an emotion that follows the meaning, okay? And the emotion is not to the experience. The emotion is to the meaning we assigned to that experience. And it's either going to be something that's positive, negative, or neutral. Those, you know, those are the types of emotions that we have. And then we are going to act as a response of how we feel based off the meaning or the belief that we have associated with or attached to that experience. Okay, so this is how things happen. All right, so let's go through an example. You send someone a text and they don't reply to you right away. Okay, you don't get a reply. So if the first thought or your thought is they're ignoring me, that's the meaning you have assigned to that situation. They're ignoring me. The emotion is you will likely experience, because of the meaning, because you believe you're being ignored, you're either going to feel rejected or you're going to be upset. Because again, right? The emotion is a response to the meaning you have given to the experience, not the experience itself. The experience is neutral, okay? You decided that this experience, I'm being ignored. Therefore, I'm being, this person is rejecting me, and that makes me angry. Whatever that is. And so, because the meaning and the emotion, they're in congruence, right? Because you're not going to say, oh, this person's ignoring me and be happy. That's not what's happened. The thought, the belief was negative. The meaning assigned to the event was negative. The emotion that followed was negative. So what do you think the behavior is going to be? It's not going to be a neutral one. It's probably going to be a strong behavior. And so you might decide, I'm going to ignore this person. This person doesn't ignore me. This person doesn't get to reject me. I'm going to reject you, let you see what it feels like. Or you're going to over-explain, right? You're gonna get in a people-pleasing mode. You're going to get in a fawning mode, right? I'm so good to you, like, remember this, and oh, I'm sorry, I know you're busy, I'm just so sorry that I probably caught you at a bad time, all because the meaning, all of this, okay, all of this is happening internally. This person has not responded, and so far, this person has not given you a reason to come to all these conclusions. It's just because you have decided that that person, the meaning behind this event, because this person did not text you right away, or even the next day, they must be ignoring you. It is all what you have developed in you. The thought, the emotion, and the behavior. It all came from within. It all came from within. Okay, now let's flip it. Let me show you how different this can be. Let's get into it, okay? Same situation, different outcomes, okay? Here's the event. You text someone, they don't reply to you right away. So you think, maybe they're busy. Maybe someone came up and they'll get to me when they can. So your thought is maybe they're busy, they can't, reply right now, for whatever the reason is. So with that kind of thought ascribed to the event, the belief and the sensation is more of a neutral tone. So your emotions are likely going to be neutral and understanding. There's nothing negative that comes out of that. It doesn't evoke negative emotions that warrant that type of behavioral response. So instead, like, your behavior is going to be calm and neutral. Like, I'm not going to blow up their phone. I'm not going to block them. I'm not going to ignore them because I already believe, right, that they're busy right now. So there's no need for me they're not going to be able to reply. The text message isn't going to disappear. It'll be there when they see it. So I'm going to go on about my day. And, when they can get to me, they'll get to me. There's nothing else I need to do. There's nothing else I can do. I'm not going to over-explain. I'm not going to assume. I'm not putting myself through all of this thinking. Because why? The kind of meaning associated with that thought. The meaning was, oh, they're busy. That's what that means. They don't reply to me right away. That means they're busy. Or they got something else going on that they can't reply to me right now. And that's okay. I would want someone that, but as you can see, the very same event, very same conditions have very different outputs based on the meanings that we assign to them. And the thing, when you are so well versed in season in survival mode and trauma responses, right? Your brain is gonna constantly gravitate to the first response, that negative one, because not only is that person ignoring me, right, and the emotions are fear and rejection, those those validate the danger that your brain and your body perceived. That's why you default there, even though you don't have any factual basis or factual data that that is what's going on. That's the conclusion we jump to. Those are the kind of meanings we assign to any minor or any inconvenience that we experience. Our brain goes black white, and it typically goes to the negative spectrum of things, because that is what our body's used to. Like, either it's danger or there's going to be a danger. And again, whether that danger is the physical danger in front of you or it's internal. And if we remember what I refer to as internal, that means it's, it's mentally or it's emotionally threatening, discomforting, and it dysregulates you. Those are the threats, okay? And your body, your brain does not differentiate between the physical threat in front of you or the one that's internal, okay? All right, cool. If you want more of that, you go to episode 1. Thank you. So to continue, right, the default into the negative is because our brain, because it has to keep us alive, which is one of its main jobs, which is in our DNA. It has to keep this organism alive. It wants to live. That's what it wants to do. And it's constantly scanning for danger. And its job, and part of that constant scanning for danger means it's always going to look for the negative, because it has to validate that that danger it was looking for was very present. It is, our brains is very self-affirming, okay? It is very self-affirming. That's, you selective thinking and different things of that nature. Yes, our brain is looking to confirm what it already believed through the senses. And it's not that, when you're in survival mode, that don't always work for us. It doesn't. It does not. It doesn't. But that is what it craves, okay? And negativity bias is a big part of that, guys. So what is negativity bias, and kind of where does it come from? What is the history behind it? So the human brain, our brains, right, it has evolved to discern threats faster than safety. Okay, and also, what does this mean? This is a real reason why us as humans gravitate towards the negative. We can spend hours and hours and hours talking about the negative, and we don't dwell on the positive long enough, okay? Because our brain, like, is highly validated with this negativity, okay? Because it validates it. And it's trained for our safety to detect danger and to focus on the danger and the negative, what we perceive as negative, over the positive, okay? And also, okay, this is why negative thoughts stick like Velcro. No matter how much we don't want to think them, no, they just come up. They just come up and they don't go away, not on their own. We have to redirect our thinking, okay? And also understand that you are not your thinking. We are the beings that think. Our thinking doesn't define us. We act on our thinking. We influence our thinking. We can be consciously engaged in our thinking, due to our prefrontal cortex. The way you think, or because a thought comes to you, does not mean that's you, okay? We have so many things. Our brain is of information, okay? And through the senses, through the symbols, it just throws everything associated with something to the forefront. So you might not be thinking those thoughts, and it could be thoughts from things that you heard, but our brain is making all of these associations that it will bring up to the forefront because it believes all of that information is relevant to whatever is at hand at the time. So if you're experiencing something negative and something adverse, a whole bunch of negative stuff is just going to flood your way. Nothing neutral. It cannot be neutral. Nothing. And so, if you think of the negatives like Velcro, they are there. They're not going anywhere. And the positive ones are just going to slide off like you slather down in some oil. The positives is just running away. Okay, they ain't going to ever stick when it comes to this brain's negativity bias. But that's what it's like when you've been in survival mode for so long. It is nearly impossible. It is nearly impossible to entertain something neutral or even positive. Okay, you can do it for like a moment, but then all the negative stuff just overpowers it, and it's like no chance, no chance. You just right back to you. I knew you was, you just way back to that, whether it's factual or not. It's crazy. Like our brains will becomes obsessive over needing to prove the danger or someone's dangerous, or it's normal, guys. It's very inconvenient when we're trying to heal, but we have to know that going through this and what is going on, because we are fighting like literally against our defense mechanism, our survival mechanism. We are going to war. Like, I want you to be quiet so I can heal. Okay? There was a time for you. There was a time for you. Now it's not the time. We're not in danger anymore. Let me live. Let me be great. But that negativity bias, boy, like it beats you before it was up before you are, and it goes to, it's the last one to go to sleep. It doesn't cut off. That's part of the reason everyone's up at night. That too, because everything that could go wrong, your brain is just like, yeah. I'm gonna shut that thing off. Shut it off. So you're not alone. Just understand that. We go through it, man. We go through it. I mean, because sometimes I've had some thoughts come to me, and I'm like, what? I would never think such a thing. But these things, when you have experienced certain trauma and you've endured certain things and you survived them and you overcome, is the things that can come up in you through, your subconscious brain, subconscious levels, and to your consciousness can be very just wild, okay, very wild. Yes. And some more stuff about the brain's components of the brain's negativity bias is that the brain will give 5 times more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. Okay, so guys, understand this, especially when you're in survival mode. What are 5 to 1? Those are not good odds. Okay, they're not good odds, and that's why many of us think at some point that that's how we are, because look at the data, look at the odds. They're not good odds. So all the negative stuff, we just let it be. We think that's how we are and who we are, and we leave it. And because we've also learned, we learn from the things that we've gone through, and just, sometimes the fight, the internal fight within our bodies, within our brains, and the emotional and mental states, it's exhausting. We just want to breathe, so sometimes we just like, okay, whatever, like we can be aware, or I can be the bigger person, or I know I'm triggered, or I know I'm this, but I'm just gonna take the loss today. I'm just gonna take the loss today, because I don't feel like fighting. I don't feel like being intentional. I don't feel like grounding myself. Like, it can be a lot of work. And listen, Listen, I understand. Okay, it's work. It's work. It's work. It's work. Um, but it's beautiful when you start doing the work. And the biggest part of that, as I've said in episode one, is being aware. You know that this is what's going on. Like this is why this stuff's happening. Like it's not just you. It's not just in your head. Okay, this is a very real reality for you. And it's you're not crazy. You're not crazy. It is how your body has learned to protect itself. Okay? But it is our job now to teach our bodies and to teach our brain to recognize safety and to understand that so it can chill out with all this negative stuff. You see what I'm saying? And it's also as a result of like negativity bias is why psychologists, therapists, and just any like self-help in general are very big on gratitude reflections and things of that nature because they're not fluff. There are ways to rewire your brain. There are ways to retrain your neurological parts of your brain, especially to start moving away from the negativity bias that the brain has. It's a way to start introducing the positive and the neutrals, to combat that brain that is very overbearing, and that's what you get on its own if it is not, if it's not, if it's not managed. You have to manage that, and the only way to do that is to be intentional and very, very proactive. But in order to do that, you have to be aware of, what's going on. Why does it function that way? So, and things of that nature, which is where we begin to talk again about neuroplasticity, which is, I like to refer to it as the brain's superpower, because survival mode and trauma and different things of that nature, they've had a way of rewiring our brain to view everything as dangerous, even safe things. So to get into a place where we can rewire it to recognize safety and different things of that nature, so sorry, is through our brain's superpower of neuroplasticity. Alright, so what is neuroplasticity? Okay, so neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize and form new connections within itself, of course. So every time like you introduce a new thought and you practice it consistently, you begin to rewire your brain. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. For like those thoughts examples that I gave earlier. Instead of having a negative thought, if you start having neutral positive thoughts, your brain would begin to rewire itself to have more neutral thoughts or more positive thoughts. Okay. And this is why literally like we are not our thoughts, but how, okay, let me not get ahead of myself. Okay, forget that. We're not gonna look at that. Okay. So, and also understand like with neuroplasticity, right? This superpower, it's great, it's beautiful, it works wonders for us. It helps with our healing process. The only drawback is that it doesn't happen fast, especially not as fast as we would like it to happen. If it could happen overnight, we would just love it, but healing doesn't happen overnight. Neuroplasticity, when you are rewiring your brain, when you're trying to make these new connections, you're trying to build new habits and different things and patterns of that nature, it requires repetition, right? Like they like to say, practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent when it comes to our brain. So going back to what I said in the beginning, you cannot heal with the same thoughts that hurt you. Okay, why? Because those same thoughts that hurt you, they are repeated, 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 influence how you perceive the world, internally and externally, and all that's involved. And if that perception is negative, everything's negative. And what's the point? So, but when you start to practice getting in control, even if it's a negative thought, reframing it, changing it, something positive, building that habit of taking your thoughts captive and I don't know, that ain't my thought. I ain't thinking that. That ain't even how I am. So, no, no, no. Let me fix that. Let me get my mind right. Let me be mindful of that and throw that away. I don't ever want to hear something like that in my brain. Um, but you have to because it'll begin to alter the chemistry of your brain, the connections that are being made, the hormones that are released in your body. Okay, all of that's impacted. All of it is impacted, and that is part of the reason why if you listen to somebody enough, you can understand how they think. It doesn't take much, and 'cause people don't really realize it, and because you can understand how they think, you have insight to how they view the world. You have insight to their behaviors. You can predict in certain situations how they will act based off their beliefs and perceptions. Just because things, it's really about the principle, and that's how our brain works. It will generalize things. So for example, for the person who decided that that person's ignoring me, if their default is negativity, right? Everything, they're gonna respond to everything in that way. And I don't know who it comes from or remember, like if it's the concept specifically, like if it has a specific name to it, but there is very much so underlying truth to how you respond in one way, or in how you do one thing is the same way you do everything, right? So, because it's also about character, and because it stems also from belief. It stems from the meaning you give things. Okay. Let me let that sit there for a little while, and that's why some people who have this insight and has this wisdom and understanding of that, they are the way they are and they move the way they move, and other people don't quite understand that because they recognize it. And when you grow and you heal, especially when people make excuses about certain things of that nature, you move a little bit differently because you get the insight, you understand how this stuff moves, how this stuff operates. And not only that, but that people have free will, and that we all have the power to change something that we don't like within ourselves, or in our environments. There are certain things that we do have control over that we can act on to change if we don't like it. So, like, coming back to the neuroplasticity, right? If you are walking through tall grass, like the first time it's hard, but the more and more you walk through it, it's easier, and eventually it starts to develop a path, right? That path is like, you're not even, it becomes second nature. You don't have to think about it anymore. You don't have to pay attention to where you're going. And it's also kind of like driving and riding a bike. Like the first few times you ride a bike, you're very hyper vigilant where your feet go, balancing. But after you've rode a bike a few times, like, you're not mindful of that. You don't think like, oh, I need to do this. No, like, you're just on riding a bike, and you're not really attentive to, especially if it's the same route that you always take. You're not really attentive to that. It's just like background noise because you don't have to think about it. And sometimes, like, people can just go on drives and end up at the destination, and they don't have much recall of what happened along the way because they were in autopilot. I what is it called? Autopilot. There we go. They were autopilot, and that is something that can happen with neuroplasticity. When you start creating these new connections, at some point, right, they're going to become so solidified in the brain Well, the brain doesn't have to establish a new connection. It will just strengthen the one that's there, just like it did with all the negative thinking. Okay, and it's the principle. The same thing happens. Okay, um, so another part of like when it comes to, and some tools when it comes to like the brain's neuroplasticity, a big one is you want to reframe these thoughts. Okay, you want to reframe them and understand, like, we are not our thoughts. Okay, and we are not comprised of, we're not the sum of our thoughts. Now, how we think, we can, if you want to be a little general about it, in some cases, like, you can look at someone's life and how their life is going or their behaviors, and you can definitely see how they think, because again, right, what we have, a thought, which is the meaning we give events, the emotion behind it, and then the behavior that follows. When you can recognize those patterns, you have these insights, if you really want to be attentive. And sometimes it's easier to recognize that in other people, but I definitely want us to be more in a way where we can recognize that within ourselves and identify that within ourselves. And so something that we can do to facilitate um, and exercise the neuroplasticity of our brain is reframing. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, first, you're going to need to notice the thoughts. Okay, you have to be intentional, you have to be aware. Don't let your thoughts just chaotically flow through your mind without order, without structure. No, get in a driver's seat, take control. This is your body, this is your brain. They don't just get the free flow, because what you're going to learn is a lot of thoughts that you think are not yours. Some of them come from things relatives have said to you, things teachers have said to you, things to haters have said to you, people that betrayed. All of those thoughts are not your thoughts, sweetheart. Or sir, young man, they're not yours. So you have to be very, very attentive to where these thoughts are coming from. And your brain, like I said, because it is on a mission already, it is looking to validate some danger somewhere, and it can create stuff. Our brain can create stuff that's not real, that's not there, that never happened. But to, you know what I'm saying? To validate itself, it will do what it needs to do. Okay. Alright. So you're gonna notice the thought. You're gonna name the feeling it creates. And then you're gonna challenge it. Like, is this a true thought? Or is it just familiar? Right, I'm actually gonna create the challenge, right? And many of us, we don't do that. We don't do that. We recognize that we've had this thought often, or we more than likely had this thought before. And what do? Is we find peace, and we stick to what's familiar, because there's a level of comfort that comes with something familiar. And if it is that familiar, it has likely been in some form validated already. So that validation is the verification process. So therefore, we don't need to re-verify it, is what our brain will conclude. And it's something that we will settle with, because our body will also come into agreement. Like, it will calm down. If it was elevated, it will calm down. And so we think that that's the answer. And oftentimes it's not the answer. Versus if we start to go venture, is this a true thought? Are they really ignoring me? No, they're not. I just have issues. I'm triggered if I feel rejected. Or they might be abandoning me. I am triggered. But oftentimes we can't recognize that yet. So we start to have all of these emotions and things come up on us that we don't have words for, like, because we haven't made the connections, because we usually just listen to our body and decide that's not territory we want to go to. And so we avoid it. And so we never really get to the place where we can identify the core causes um, of what triggers it. So that can be what's going on. But when you have the thought and the feeling associated, you want to why. You want to know why. Is this true? Is this fact? Should I be feeling this way? Has this person said anything to me or done anything like this before to make me think that? Or is the facts that this, I know that this person is working. And if I know this person is working, why am I trying to say they're ignoring me? Like, they're working. They can't be on their phone. See, some of us don't want to use that part of our brain, okay? Because when we're often, again, in that survival mode, things of that nature, we don't have to that much, because our system is telling us we're in danger or danger is going to be near. And so the high level thinking is not required, and that reflective thinking is not required when we're in such a state. Okay? How fun. How fun is that? It's a process, guys, and it's just a process. But we're gonna get through this. We're gonna get through this together, and I hope that I'm being clear about certain things, and I'm hoping that I'm bringing you the clarity, because I know it is easier said than it's done, but it's definitely doable, and you don't have to do it alone. Okay, so back, if you have your notes and things out, which I think I need to start requesting, bring a notebook and write stuff down. Okay, so notice your thought, name the feeling that it creates, challenge it. Is it true or is it just familiar? Okay, all right, and then from there, if it's not true and it's just familiar, you want to replace it with the truth. Okay, and then you want to continue to repeat it until it becomes believable, and this is how you're going to start rewiring your brain. So let us get to an example, right? If you have this thought, I can't trust anyone, is that familiar or is it true? Is it truthful? Right? What feelings, also what feelings are associated with that? If I can't trust anyone, that makes me feel anxious. That makes me afraid. That makes me feel vulnerable. It makes me feel not safe. Right? It's going to validate that I'm in danger and I'm not safe. So if I don't trust anyone, my brain is, and if I can't trust anyone, my brain is okay with that, because it validates the danger, the perceived danger, and all the negativity that comes with it, because there's nothing positive about not being able to trust, or believing that you can't trust anyone. So that's what we're up against. But the next step is to balance it with something that's truthful. So my next step would be, instead of I can't trust anyone, right? I'm challenging it. Now it's going to be, not everyone is trustworthy, but I'm learning who is. Right? So I'm acknowledging that there are going to be people that I cannot trust, but everybody is not like that. I'm learning to recognize who's trustworthy and who's not. That allows me to take a progressive stance. It gives me control and it gives me power. It sets me up to be in a driver's seat, to where I can be aware. I can observe who is trustworthy and who isn't, versus throw everyone in the trash, and especially because I might have learned, from my upbringing and the environments I was around, that typically was the case. But when we also have these validating thoughts and things of that nature, and we meditate on them, right, we will manifest those beliefs. And so, again, like, we will cultivate towards people that validate that belief that people aren't trustworthy, and that's why untrustworthy people will continue to show up in your life, because that's what you believe, and you invite those people because that's unconsciously what you believe, and they will continue to validate that people are untrustworthy. Okay, let that sit. Let that sit there. Okay, this is where this comes from. Thinking is a big deal. I said your mind, your thoughts control your reality, right? So we, in 2026, we cannot heal from the same thoughts that are hurting us. If you believe people cannot be trusted and you continue to repeat that, think about that. If somebody, right, maybe you're in a financial situation and you're struggling, but if people can't be trusted, you're not going to ask for help. And if you have children, you can put your children in danger. You might lose them, because people cannot be trusted, right? If you're having a health crisis, people cannot be trusted, so you might not ever tell anybody that you're battling an illness, sickness. And that could have been curable, but because people cannot be trusted, we lose life with some of these thoughts that are familiar to us that we don't challenge. When we could be thriving, we could be living very peaceful, calm, enjoyable lives. But we can't heal with the thoughts that are hurting us. We stay with the thoughts that are hurting us, and we don't move from it. But we will, okay? We will. All right, and I hope that example was very, very helpful, because we have to start giving ourselves thoughts that allow us to move forward, that are progressive in their design, and they don't keep us stuck, and what I really love about this example is it still acknowledges that some people are not trustworthy, because that's a fact. You can't trust everybody. You simply can't. But it doesn't put you in the box where you can self-sabotage your life. You can do harm to yourself because you think everyone is untrustworthy. But knowing that you're learning and that you can learn who's trustworthy and who's not, that's empowering. And it's like food for your soul. It's something neutral and positive to, hopefully try to off balance, but get the scales a little bit level between the negativity bias. All right, and then another thing you can do to further exercise your brain's superpower or neuroplasticity is being mindful, okay? And that also comes with being aware of your thoughts, taking your thoughts captives, and understanding, like, again, because I said it I don't know how many times, but you are not your thoughts. You observe your thoughts, okay? Be aware of that, and start to say, like, I am experiencing this, right? I'm having the thought that I am not enough, because some of us will just say, I'm not enough, versus I'm having the thought that I'm not enough, or we'll say, I'm angry. You're not, no. I'm experiencing anger. Those are very different things. We identify with our thoughts, but we are not our thoughts. We are not our emotion. We experience them. Let's be mindful. We are experiencing this thought, this belief, but we can challenge it. Am I gonna accept this or no? Because this is not who I am. This is not the kind of energy I want radiating over here. So those are some ways you can, be more engaged and exercise more of your brain's neuroplasticity, just to, help rewire it so you can heal, baby. So we can all heal, because there's nothing like peace and calm, especially from within. And, our brain's superpower, oh my goodness, sorry guys. Our brain's superpowers, it empowers us to break the cycle of negative thinking, which is so beautiful. And we're going to talk about that. All right. So let's talk about breaking the cycle of negative thinking. All right. So the first. I was sitting in that position too long. All right. You guys are just gonna have to give me some grace. All right. Sometimes my thoughts are all over the place and I get ahead of myself. But that's a lot of the excitement, and it's also to keep you on your toes and make sure you're paying attention. Mhm. All right. And I'm okay with that. So how can we break the cycle of negative thinking when we're up against our brain's negativity bias? One thing that we can do is be aware without judgment. What does this mean? And this is life changing. Okay, guys? What does this mean? That means, like, if we want to think of mindfulness, right? We can be aware that we are experiencing a thought or an emotion, but we're not going to judge it, right? And what I mean by that is we're not going to judge it by labeling as good or bad, or wrong or right, okay? So you will have victory when you notice your thoughts, even if they're spiraling. You don't condemn yourself. Like, for example, like if your child did something made you upset, and you, oh well, they're only a baby. I shouldn't have got so upset. That's so wrong. No, you experience an emotion. You experienced it. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean the emotion was wrong. It was sometimes the emotional response that we have is very valid to something. It's not a right or wrong thing. But sometimes we feel or become to believe that we should not have experienced that emotion in that moment, and feel bad about it, when no, and this is how some of us, like, we get emotionally wonky because we are over here judging these things inappropriately. And for example, if somebody betrayed you, you are going to be hurt and you're going to feel upset. That is a valid response to what you experienced. There's nothing wrong about it. There's nothing bad with it. It's appropriate, and it's not even necessarily that it's right and good. It's appropriate. It was an appropriate response to have to being betrayed by someone that you trusted. Okay, you're not gonna be happy about that. You're not gonna feel good about it. What you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And but if you come around and be like, oh, that I shouldn't. No, we're not gonna make excuses. We experienced that very valid response to that event, and that's just what that was. It was an experience. Now, does it need to dictate anything? No. But we have to be aware, and that is how we can break that cycle. Being aware and not judging for good or bad, because our brain wants us to categorize things as bad or wrong when we think them or experience them. Because then it'll start conjuring up all the other bad and negative things that we experience, and further, like, create all of these connections to things that might not even really be appropriate to connect it to. But if it believes it validates that, negativity, it will do that. And another thing that we want to do to, engage in our superpower, and start breaking the negative thinking cycles, is we're going to replace our reactions with reflections, okay? Because most times, again, like, what's familiar, we usually go with what's familiar, and that's our reaction, right? That we just react. But if we have a thought, because that's how things are filtered, right? The experience happens, here's the experience, and then we have the thought, then we have the feeling, and then we act. So if our first act can be coming back to here and noticing this thought, we will be engaging in our, our higher levels of thinking and reasoning. And this allows us to be rational, logical, and practical, and measure, like, do I really need to respond in this way? Is, oftentimes we don't get there, but this is a way we can start breaking that negative thinking, okay? And they taught us this as kids. I don't know if they teach it anymore, but I can't even think of the song, but I think it was like on PBS or something. But it was like, pause and think, before you do some, man, I don't know, I'm gonna have to find it. You gotta check yourself. Oh, check yourself if you're sure by the way that you feel. Here's something that'll help you deal. Come on, come on. You gotta check yourself. Check yourself. That wasn't the song I was looking for, but I remember that tune. Yeah, so things like that, I don't think they teach this in schools anymore. But I'm grateful that I was born when I was born, because stop, think before you act were things that were like Sesame Street, PBS. Um, it was something that was regular, Society's different now with technology and a whole bunch of different things and stressors that are going on in the world. Everyone is in like survival mode. Everyone is kind of like stressed out, to some degree, and it's tough. It's tough, as parents, there's a lot of debt. There's a lot of things like it's hard to just want to pause and stop and think. It's not familiar to do that, and it's not. But hopefully, this has been more very eye opening and empowering to let you know that you can do these things, and I'm living testimony of it, because I needed to survive. I don't want to go back to that place where my body is a war zone. I like the peace that I'm able to experience and the calm now, and you can do the same thing. And that's why I share. That's why we're all here. So yeah, when you're able to do these pauses, when you notice certain thoughts, that's where the transformation begins. That's when the new connections start to happen, and some of those old ones start to die out and get replaced. Um, Number 3, you want to practice emotional regulation. This is a big one, okay? This is a big one. We have way too many children in adult bodies, okay? We just have way too many. We have way too many, and it's not all their fault. Parents are out here doing whatever they're doing, and some of them were never taught to regulate. Like I told my husband recently, it takes a lot for me, because I wasn't really hugged and things like that as a child. So learning to regulate myself took a whole lot more work, than it does for children who were loved and hugged and shown affection. So, and again, self-awareness comes with that as well. But one of the biggest ways that I've coped with my emotional regulation is, recreational activities, sports, things of that nature, music. If I had a very strong emotional response to something, I could write a song, or play, a tune, or go run, depending on how intense it was. Poetry, different things of that nature, things that allows you to calm your nervous system, before you can start challenging some of the thoughts, because it's going to be hard to confront and challenge a thought if you're not calm. You're still in your Hulk brain. It's not calm enough for you to be reflective and insightful of the situation. And another thing you want to do is you want to build evidence for the new belief, right? Maybe start journaling your small wins, your small proofs of your realized, like gains, positive thoughts, positive thinking, neutral thinking, because when you have this evidence, your brain will trust it more, okay? Because just like it looks for all the negative stuff to validate, reminding yourself of the positive, your brain will begin to trust it more, because it's data, it's evidence, it's proof. just like in a court, that what is the proof is in a pudding, and your brain will calm down. So I guess like a quick example, like if you've ever if you ever had somebody who was telling you how changed they are, and there's no proof that they changed, when you go and evaluate the evidence, your brain's the same way. But if they do have, like, you do see and you watch over time and they have the fruit that they've changed, you start to believe it, and you can calm down because now you have the proof, you can see it for yourself. um, and it can become a very beautiful thing, but again, it's something that you have to be very intentional about. It doesn't just happen on its own. You have to be very, very intentional about it. And let's get into some reflections really quickly. um, for the next few days, for the next week, until you see me next time, I want you to write down one old thought that you had. I want you to release it, and I want you to replace it. And what you replace it with, I want you to continue to repeat it until um, you start to believe the truth, okay, about it. And it's not always going to feel truthful yet, because you're trying to teach your mind a new language, and so you're not going to be fluent at it. And like for me, telling myself I'm safe, that is something I have to tell me. I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. Obviously, my body and my brain does not believe that I'm safe when I first started to, to do this practice. And I mean, and it still challenges me when I have a escalated moment, and I'm being mindful and very intentional to regulating, like, hey, I'm safe, like, I'm grounding, this is where I'm at, this is what I see, this is what I hear, this is what I smell, things of that nature. But I have to keep doing it. But it gets easier the more you practice, just like with any exercise. The more you do it, the muscle memory, all of those things, and eventually there's a part where you don't have to think about it, because it just starts to happen automatically. And it becomes an autopilot thing. So just understand that that is okay. All right. And here are some examples for you to, like, just follow up with. Like, if you have an old thought is, I'm always behind, you can reframe that to, I'm moving at a pace of purpose. And like for me, this is very eye-opening, because like in a business space, like I feel like, oh, not that I'm missing out, but like for the plans that I had, that I'm behind. But now it's like, you know what, I had to learn. I had some lessons that I needed to learn, and that's part of the journey, learning. And learning takes time. And if you have another thought, like, right, I mess everything up, maybe a new truth or a new thought you can give yourself is, I'm learning and I'm improving every day. Because when you start to believe I'm learning and I'm improving, like, you understand, and you give your brain the capacity to acknowledge that there are going to be times where something can be perceived as a mistake, where it's because you're learning. You're not going to know everything. Everything's not going to be perfect. It allows that grace that's kind of built into this belief that I'm learning and I'm improving. And versus, I mess everything. No, I'm learning. Maybe there was something I didn't know, but I learned it now. So those are some examples that can help you along the way. And also understand that renewing your mind isn't about, it isn't about denying the reality. You're not gonna create a whole new world. No. We're not gonna go off, venture off in a la la land. Okay, we're not gonna deny the reality of what we go through. It's about retraining our perception. Okay, our perception, because there's facts, and then there's our perceptions of the facts, of the event, of the experiences. It's about retraining those and making sure that that perception, that meaning we assign to it, is accurate and appropriate for it, and the emotions to match. Okay. So with the close, understand, like, you've lived long enough in fear, long enough in fear, in the rehearsal of that fear. It has now become the time to practice peace. Okay? You can't heal with the same thoughts that hurt you. So we're gonna heal with the thoughts that heal us. Alright? Thank you guys for joining the Chrysalis Room, where we heal, become, and we thrive.